friends, welcome back to comprehension and vocabulary. Today we are going to deliberate on Economic Times 3rd March editorial. Reserve Bank of India scrap these cash transaction charges. Some banks recently decided to implement certain aspects with regard to cash transaction charges if cash transaction exceeds a certain limit. So, this is all with regard to that, and tomorrow we are going to deliberate the Economic Times editorial of 7th March, that is finance calls for unified regulation. This issue is with regard to the SEBI and Reserve Bank of India. Recently, SEBI questioned the Reserve Bank of India's instruction, and in that context this editorial feels about there is a need for unified regulation instead of several regulators like IRDAI, SEBI, RBI. So, these many regulators are not required. The situation calls for one unified regulator. So, that is about tomorrow's article, and today let us look at this. RBI scrap these cash transaction charges. The editorial is advising Reserve Bank of India to scrap these cash transaction charges. And you see, this is with regard to, as I have already told you, country's 3 private sector banks, ICICI, HDFC and Axis, have imposed costs on consumers for transactions in branches if they exceed certain withdrawal limits, right. So, here RBI scrap these cash transaction charges. Scrap, last time we discussed, scrap means discarded metal, and another one is not continuing with a system. So, government decided to scrap FIPB. Government decided to scrap Foreign Investment Promotion Board as per budget speech of 2017-18. So, scrap is used when something is discontinued from the existing system, right. So, formal sector, informal sector, these words are used here. Formal sector is nothing but this banking system, maybe it is cooperative bank, maybe it is public sector bank, private sector bank, this all known as formal sector, and the informal sector is money lenders, traders, friends, this is all informal sector. And ostensibly, here in the paragraph it was used in February, the government said that 20 million new zero balance bank accounts had been created. Why he used had? Because he is talking about some sentence or some statement pertaining to February. That is why he used had been created, right. So, here in February the government said that 20 million new zero balance bank accounts had been created. So, ostensibly, I will come to the meaning of this word ostensibly, to get India's underbanked citizens into the formal financial system. So, just now I explained about this formal and informal. So, this is formal financial system and this is informal system. Informal system is traders, money lenders. Formal system is established based on certain law, certain regulation, then it is called formal sector. So, to bring people into formal sector, 20 million accounts, zero balance accounts were created ostensibly. Ostensibly, I gave 2 examples. You will come to the conclusion what is the meaning of ostensibly. And similarly, I will explain you about apparently. What is the difference between ostensibly and apparently? Ostensibly here appears to be one thing, but really it is something else. Ostensibly is used when something appears one thing, but reality it is something else. Here I gave one example, that lady lost her husband recently, but she looks cheerful. Look at the sentence, her ostensible cheerfulness, she looks cheerful, but lot of sadness and agony is there in her mind because of loss of her husband. So, please understand this sentence. This ostensible is used at the appropriate place. her ostensible cheerfulness concedes sadness as she lost her husband recently. She looks cheerful, but it is not true. She is under lot of agony, she is under sadness. And another example you see, ostensibly. United States Secretary of State was ostensibly on holiday. United States Secretary of State, the mission is something else. He is ostensibly on a holiday, but actually he was on a diplomatic mission. Ostensibly he was on holiday, but actually he was on a diplomatic mission. So, ostensibly is used, it looks something, real purpose is something else. So, apparently is, if something seems to happen under those circumstances, apparently is used. Apparently, it is going to rain today. It may rain or it may not rain, but it seems to happen that it will rain today. So, apparently is used when something seems to happen. So, ostensibly, apparently, please be cautious in using these words. So, the government said that 20 million new zero balance accounts had been created ostensibly to get India's underbanked citizens into the formal financial system less than a month later. This statement was given in February, that is why it was mentioned as had been created. So, here less than a month later, 3 of the country's largest private sector banks, and here in between these two, he is expanding that. What are these 3 private sector banks? When you are reading the passage, please understand wherever commas are put and wherever these type of marks are put, then you have to understand that some additional information is given under these circumstances. So, here the 3 banks are ICICI, HDFC and Axis have imposed, here had is used, here have is used, because he is talking about the present context, that is why have is used. And when he is talking about some previous context, had is to be used. So, that is the difference between had, have. So, please understand, please read the passage, and when you are not clear about had been, have been, then the paragraph may not be understood by you. So, here have imposed costs on consumers for transactions in cash at bank branches. When you are transacting cash at bank branches, only 4 cash withdrawals or deposits are free. Only 4 cash withdrawals, withdrawing money or deposits would be free per account in branch from the 5th transaction. From the 5th transaction, a minimum of rupees 150 would be added on as cost. So, these restrictions were put by these 3 private sector banks recently, and because of this, this editorial says it is advising Reserve Bank of India scrap all these transaction charges. It goes against the universal banking principles, because several people in the rural hinterland are dependent on bank branches for depositing money day in and day out, for withdrawing money day in and day out, because sufficient number of ATMs are not available, and at the same time because of financial illiteracy, people are not able to use this ATMs in rural areas. So, that is the precise reason why this passage or editorial suggests please scrap these transaction charges. Look at the next paragraph. Next paragraph says that ICICI Bank, he is talking about 3 banks, and ICICI Bank would levy an additional rupees 5 for every rupees 1000 transacted. So, if you are beyond the free limit, beyond 4 transactions, if you are withdrawing cash or if you are depositing cash, ICICI would charge an additional rupees 5 for every 1000 transacted. ATM transactions are exempt, they say only branch transactions are affected. Oh, really? So, here the interesting point here is he is somewhat the editorial somewhat sees something which you can say that the banks are somewhat going in different direction. They are exempting ATMs, but actually rural areas bank branches are more used in rural areas. So, exempting ATMs is in fact banks are saying that we are exempting ATMs, but exempting ATMs may not make any difference in rural areas because they are basically dependent on branches. So, in that context he used this. So, here levy, what is the meaning of levy? I gave two meanings. Under two circumstances levy used. Levy is used basically as an amount of money such as a tax that has to be paid to a government organization. Here see the example, government proposes an additional 10% levy on the manufacture of alcohol. Government proposes an additional 10% levy. So, here levy conveys additional tax or something. So, levy is used in the context of tax, or levy is sometimes used as a verb which indicates act of transacting or charging the tax. Here you please differentiate between these two examples. In the first example, levy indicates direct tax. In the second example, it indicates act of charging the tax. Government will levy 40% duty on the imported goods. So, under those two circumstances, levy is used. So, what I mean to convey is levy is used directly as a tax sometimes, and sometimes as a verb which indicates it is the act of charging the tax. So, these two ways you have to infer levy. So, here rupees 5 per rupees 1000 transacted, a country of 1.33 billion people, around 133 crore people, has less than 2.2 lakh ATM machines. So, 133 crore people, just 2.2 lakh ATM machines, mostly confined to metropolitan areas. So, that is why he used oh really, right. So, here look at the next paragraph, everybody else in the vast hinterland has to operate through branch banking. Here I would like to explain you what is meant by vast. Vast means extremely large. Here I gave one example, pharmaceutical companies generally require huge sums on research and development. Vast means huge, you can say extremely large, very great extent. And hinterland, what is the meaning of hinterland? Hinterland means remote areas of the country is one meaning. Hinterland has got two meanings, please understand carefully. Remote areas of the country away from the coast. I gave one example, Democratic Party candidate Hillary Clinton in 2016 presidential elections could not gauge the mood of the people in hinterland. Hinterland means the remotest parts of the country. Please look into this. Predominantly coastal regions voted for Hillary Clinton and the hinterland is voted for Donald Trump. So, this red shows voting for Donald Trump, and coastal areas, rich areas have voted for Hillary Clinton. So, the hinterland meaning is remotest parts of the country, interior areas of the country, away from the coastland. This is the meaning of hinterland. So, Hillary Clinton could not gauge the mood of the people in the hinterland of the country, that resulted in the victory of Donald Trump. Another meaning for hinterland is areas surrounding cities. Areas surrounding cities, or you can say rural areas surrounding cities and on which the city is dependent. Under those circumstances also hinterland is used. Here you see the area that surrounds a big city or port. Two meanings, please understand, this is one meaning, interior areas of the country, and the other meaning is the area that surrounds a big city or port and on which the city or port depends for economic growth. The example I have given, the growth of various cities in agri-rich areas in our country is dependent on the hinterland. Right. Let us come back to the passage. everybody else in the vast hinterland, that means large, or you can say extremely huge hinterland, or you can say extremely large rural areas of the country, the exact meaning is this. So, everybody else in the vast hinterland has to operate through branch banking because sufficient ATMs are not available, restricting third party cash transactions to rupees 25,000 per day as HDFC Bank proposes, or rupees 50,000 per day as ICICI Bank will have it, along with these new cash transaction costs. So, here transaction costs are imposed on one hand, and on the other hand third party cash transactions are restricted. If I am the account holder with ICICI Bank, if somebody else is depositing on my behalf, if somebody else is depositing, it is restricted to 50,000 per day, and in HDFC Bank it is restricted to 25,000 rupees per day. So, restricting third party cash transactions along with the new cash transaction costs can destroy small and medium businesses. Small and medium businesses across the country are primarily dependent on cash, and if third party cash transactions are restricted, and at the same time if cash transaction limits are imposed, number of times is imposed, then small and medium businesses will be worst affected, and the informal and farm economy will be worst affected and slam the brakes on growth. So, they will be forcibly slam means forcibly, they will apply brakes on growth. So, growth will be hampered, growth will be halted, forcible brakes will be applied on the growth. That is the meaning of slam. Slamming the door. What is the meaning? Strongly closing the door is slamming the door. In economy, the meaning is if something is done with a strong force, then slam is to be used. So, if all these things are implemented, then automatically the growth will be stifled. MSMEs, as per MSMEs Act, these are small and medium enterprises, micro, small and medium enterprises. It all depends on the type of investment and the value of investment. Investment in plant and machinery and equipment, it all depends on services or manufacturing firms. When somebody is investing just up to rupees 25 lakhs in manufacturing, that is micro enterprise. In services sector, if somebody is just rupees 10 lakhs, if somebody is investing in services, that is micro enterprise. So, this is the bifurcation of micro, small and medium enterprises. Then organized sector. Here the article talks about formal informal sector. Formal sector is normally bound by certain rules and regulations of the country, and informal sector is not bound by rules and regulations of the country. And what I mean to convey is rules and regulations are not required to be maintained stringently for informal sector. And here I have given differentiation between organized sector, unorganized sector, and normally the other name is formal sector, informal sector, right. So, here I talked about organized sector, so unorganized sector. So, the paragraph says unorganized sector or informal sector will be badly affected, and there is a difference between what is formal, informal, what is organized, what is unorganized. I am not going into details, and here I want to convey only the organized sector means like Indian Railways, BHEL, then Hyundai Car Company, all these things are examples of organized sector, and roadside kirana shop, cycle shop, then most of the construction industry, most of the agriculture sector. So, these are examples of unorganized sector, right. So, slam, I already told you, slam means it will shut a door with force, and slam, please look at the second example, this is pertaining to economy. You see the example, the USA President Donald Trump has been slammed by critics. So, here somebody is criticized forcibly, under those circumstances you have to use a slam. right. So, slammed by the critics across the world for his tough immigration policies. Then zero balance and salary accounts have not been spared the 4 transactions per month rule by private banks. Even zero balance accounts, salary accounts, they have to follow this rule. If the government and Reserve Bank of India, if the government of India as well as Reserve Bank of India do not step in immediately, what is the meaning of this? When RBI and government do not intervene immediately to stop private banks from imposing these transaction costs, impose. Please look into this example. Impose means officially forcing a rule or tax or punishment, it is to be obeyed. So, officially if something is imposed, if something is officially given as a punishment, a tax, then only you have to use impose. Under GST, around 30 to 40% of demerit tax is proposed to be imposed on cigarettes. This is known as a sin tax. So, here if RBI and Government of India do not step in immediately to stop private banks from imposing these transaction costs, then state owned banks like public sector banks might follow suit. What is the meaning of might also follow suit? Follow suit means they will also go in the same way. Now, private sector banks imposed transaction costs. If RBI, Government of India do not interfere, then public sector banks will also follow suit. The meaning is will also go in the same pattern of imposing the transaction costs. So, follow suit means to follow the same pattern. I gave one example, as Reliance Jio slashed the prices of data, other telecom operators have been forced to follow suit. So, follow suit means to follow the same pattern. If that happens, if imposition of transaction costs by public sector banks also happen, then the hope of extending formal banking to most of India will be proved a farce. So, here formal sector I already explained you, formal means banking sector, whether it is cooperative bank or public sector bank, private sector bank, foreign bank, it does not matter, that is all formal sector. Informal sector is money lenders, traders, friends, this comes under informal sector. So, if that happens, then the hope of extending formal banking to most of India will be proved a farce. Here I gave 2 examples of farce. Farce means an empty or ridiculous act, proceeding or situation. One example I have given here, please understand carefully, you will understand this word, you do not forget. Normally, the trial or judicial process against politicians in our country ultimately turn out to be a farce. So, nothing will come out. 10 years, 15 years, in most of the cases judicial probe will go on for 10-15 years and ultimately it turn out to be farce, right. So, another example, when something is badly organized, then also you can use farce. The meeting convened by the flood affected persons turned out to be farce. The meaning is that is very badly organized. The situation which is because of very badly organized, that is a farce. So, let us go back to the passage. Extending formal banking to most of India will prove to be a farce. Nothing will come out. So, we will go back to the previous era. A new banking apartheid which favors wealthy customers and large transactions and excludes a small person from the banking system will become the norm. If this continues, what will happen? This favors wealthy customers and large transactions, and it will exclude small persons from the banking system, because a person having micro enterprise may deposit money once in 2-3 days, whereas a rich customer may keep it in his house and may deposit lakhs of rupees at one go. So, here it will create a new banking apartheid. What is the meaning of apartheid? Apartheid word originated because of racial discrimination in certain parts, that is South Africa. South Africa, the meaning of apartheid is a political system in which people of different races are separated. Prior to 1990s, South Africa was one classic example of apartheid. That means white people were given supremacy in comparison to black people. So, South Africa suffered badly because of apartheid, and finally it ended because of Nelson Mandela. So, apartheid means separating the races and giving priorities to one particular race, and which was prevalent till 1990s in South Africa. So, here if government do not stop it, then it will lead to banking apartheid. Rich customers will be benefited and poor customers will come out of the banking system, will be forced to come out of the banking system. The aim should be to make digital transactions so easy and costless as to make use of cash look foolish. So, here the aim should be to make digital transactions so easy and costless. So, the first task is make digital transactions very easy and costless. People are not clear about several charges as far as digital transactions are concerned. So, all of them must go away. So, digital transactions must become very easy. So, here it may lead to new banking apartheid. So, this editorial is quite serious about the banking apartheid and imposing transaction charges beyond certain limit that goes against the universal banking theory, and everything whatever we have done will go waste and poor people will be forced to go out of the banking system. So, that is the entire crux of this passage. Tomorrow, finance calls for unified regulation. So, this is with regard to some difference of opinion, or you can say SEBI is not accepting with what RBI has said. So, tomorrow we are going to deliberate on what are various finance sector regulators, and all those things we will deliberate tomorrow, and this is the Economic Times editorial of 7th March. We will discuss tomorrow. So, with this we will conclude today's comprehension ability discussion. Have a nice day. Thank you.